Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. It is now time for the meta predictions for the Indianapolis regionals. Of course, Indianapolis is this weekend, and well, like Orlando, it's going to be the largest regional of all time. It's a massive tournament. There's a lot of people signed up. It's going to be a big one, and I'm excited to look and see what's going to do well at this tournament. I will be in attendance, so yeah, if you see me at Indianapolis, don't be afraid to come up and say hi, take a picture with me, sign something, whatever. It's all Gucci and all that good stuff. Hope to meet some of y'all at Indianapolis. I will be in attendance, and I'm excited to see what's going to go down. I haven't really decided what I'm going to play yet personally, but there are a lot of decks to play right now, especially as the meta is so centered around Charizard EX. Charizard EX, best deck in the format right now. I've already done a video doing the top 10 best decks in the format, and also I ranked the meta right now on a tier list. If you want to go watch those videos, make sure to go watch them after this. You want to look a little bit more into the meta heading into Indianapolis this weekend. And if you're new here to the second channel, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 14,000 subs, and go on to leave a like if you enjoyed today's video. So, meta predictions, we got to start things off with the elephant in the room. Charizard EX is BDIF. I don't think anybody's going to argue that Charizard is the best deck in the format right now. Now, there are three different ways Charizard is going to see play this weekend, in my opinion. There's the three main ways. So, the first way is, of course, the Tord Liam build here from Orlando Regionals, playing the double Turo, the Yell's Cheer, the Prime Catcher being the main ace spec of the deck, and, of course, the double Charmeleon. Now, 2 Charmeleon, I think, is actually optimal right now in Charizard. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody just net decked the Liam build here from Orlando and just played it and did well with it, because this build is still pretty solid right now in our format. I think double Charmeleon is a lot stronger heading into Indianapolis too, just because of the threats of the other Charizard decks that are popping up right now. But yeah, the Tordzard build is really, really strong, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Tordzard do really good at the tournament. It's the most common way to play the deck, in my opinion. Like, if you're going to run into somebody with Charizard, who's not, like, a big name, who's probably playing Charizard, there's a good chance that, like, a more casual player is going to pick up Charizard this weekend, and they're going to be playing the Liam build, right? The more simple build of the deck. But that doesn't mean there are other ways to play Charizard. The other main way to play it is going to be with the Regieleki. Now, in my opinion, I think the Regieleki Charizard deck is really powerful into the mirror match. Regieleki is a very good card because it allows you to get back important resources like Rare Candy, Eerie, Turo, Palpad, TM Devolution. Any, like, really good card you can get back with Regieleki. And also really good in the mirror match, because in the mirror, you have the TM Devo Regieleki duo. You also have Eerie. Eerie, of course, being really good in the mirror. Usually use Eerie after Charizard does Rotom or Cleffa to build their hand up, and then you hit them with an Eerie. You try to get rid of a Rod or a Rare Candy or two. And you just kind of Grinch them that way. You can really diminish Charizard's resources in the mirror with the Regieleki. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of top players playing the Regieleki version of Charizard. I do think it is the strongest Charizard build to play right now in a Charizard-centered meta. But then, of course, there is the Pedro Patusi build from Sao Paulo playing the Mist Energy and the Hero's Cape. Also does have Eerie and double TM Devo, so it's a little bit more tacked out for the mirror match. Also, because you do have the double TM Devo, you have the Hero's Cape. Hero's Cape is really good in Charizard. Now, you do lose access to Prime Catcher, which is a pretty big trade-off to have to play the Hero's Cape. You don't get X to Prime Catcher, right? At least with the Regieleki build, you're still playing Prime Catcher. This build doesn't play Prime Catcher. You're opting for Hero's Cape. This is the thing with Charizard right now. You don't know what ace spec they're going to be playing. And there's also Maximum Belt, which I didn't really highlight, but Maximum Belt could also see play this weekend, mainly because Max Belt does allow Charizard to have a better matchup into Chien-Pao, because you can actually knock out the Chien-Pao in the active spot, which a lot of the time just wins you the game. So I do think that Charizard is a little bit of a sneaky deck right now with all the different ace specs you can play. Now, in my opinion, if you're going to be playing against somebody who's playing a Charizard deck, they flip over a Charmander, I'm immediately going to assume they're playing the Tord build with the Prime Catcher and the Double Turo and the more Liam build. But you got to be prepared for Hero's Cape and Regieleki shenanigans, because there could be a lot of that going on. But like I said, Charizard's going to be the most played deck at the tournament, most likely going to be like a well over 23% of the meta. Don't be surprised if it's the most played deck. And honestly, it's probably the deck that has the highest chance of winning the regional. There isn't really any deck right now that just flat out beats Charizard, except for Charizard itself. So I honestly, if I had to put money on it, there's another good chance Charizard could just win another regional this weekend. Depends on what build goes hard enough. Then, of course, Chien-Pao is like kind of behind Charizard in terms of like ranking. Chien-Pao is a very good deck. It's also one of the only decks that can reliably beat Charizard. Again, it doesn't flat out beat Charizard, especially with Charizard playing Hero's Cape, Eerie and Regieleki, double TM Devo. These are all big threats for Chien-Pao. It's not a perfect deck, but it does have an okay matchup in a Charizard. Probably the best Charizard matchup out of any deck in the format right now probably goes to Chien-Pao. It's a very strong deck, and it can beat a lot of other decks. Obviously, Chien-Pao is a really good card. Iron Hands is really good. On bundles really good. The Silene, I think, is perfect. Like the 60 from Orlando that Reagan played is probably the perfect 60 for Chien-Pao. There's a good chance Chien-Pao's second most played deck at Indianapolis. Like I yeah, it's pretty much going to be the second most played deck by far. Chien-Pao is going to be very popular. It's going to be the second most played deck. It's a really good pick for the tournament. I don't know if you can even change the Reagan Retzloff 60 here. It's just that good right now. Lost Tina, I think Lost Tina is slipping a little bit. I don't know if it's getting better for Indy. It's probably not. It's probably getting a little bit worse. Obviously, Chien-Pao isn't your best matchup. You do have an okay matchup in a Zard, though Zard with Hero's Cape and Mist Energy is a lot more difficult to manage because they can put Hero's Cape on Pidgeot. They have the Mist Energy. That Zard build is a little bit more tricky, and even Zard playing like Regieleki Erie is also pretty bad for Giratina because they can obviously get rid of your Super Rods and your Mirage Gates, making it pretty tricky for you to keep attacking. But Giratina is still decent against Charizard, and it's not a terrible deck. Giratina is still a very strong deck. It does have its weak matchups. I think Chien-Pao and Ancient Box are a little sketchy. The Roaring Moon deck isn't great either, but Giratina is still just a very strong deck. But sometimes it doesn't matter when you have these like bad matchups, but it is a deck that can beat Charizard, though it is getting a little bit harder for Giratina to beat Charizard right now. We might see one in top 8. Gardevoir is another deck right now I think is very good. I think there's going to be a lot more Gardevoir this weekend than there was in Orlando because Gardevoir's starting to get a bit of a reputation in the format right now. It does have an okay Zard matchup. It's actually really good into a lot of decks. Its worst matchup is probably going to be the Chien-Pao deck and then probably the Ancient deck. Like Ancient Box is an abysmal matchup for Gardevoir in my opinion, but Gardevoir, other than that, isn't bad in the meta. It is a little bit more different, harder to play, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little bit more Gardevoir this weekend. Like going into this tournament, I think you actually might have to respect Gardevoir just a little bit because I think it's a little bit more popular this weekend, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another one make it into top 8. Then we got Arctina, the most like straightforward deck you can play right now. It's decent into Charizard, and that's really all you need right now is to just have an okay Zard matchup. Now, Arctina definitely does have its faults. It's not fantastically consistent. You're relying sometimes on Judge finding you an Arc V. I do think the build with Lost City is great right now, though. It does actually fix more of your awkward matchups. Like Ancient Box is a tough one without Lost City, and then Chien-Pao is also pretty tough, too. But yeah, Arctina just seems to be doing its thing right now. Pretty good chance one could make top 16 again. A couple were in top 16 in Orlando. That could happen again. Arctina is just a very straightforward deck. Its Zard matchup is decent. That's really all you need right now is just to have an okay Zard matchup. Though I do think you need to play the Radiant Gardevoir in the deck right now to help against the Lost Tina matchup, which the Lost Tina might get a bit worse. One deck that I also think is going to be a little bit more popular this weekend is going to be Lost Box. This deck did get second place at Sao Paulo, and Lost Box does present itself as having a good matchup into the Charizard deck, right? Now, it's going to struggle a bit into Hero's Cape Mist Energy Zard, but in the more normal stance of Charizard, like the more Liam Tord build, I think Lost Box is great at that. It's a good deck for that matchup. Though the Regieleki build is also pretty bad, just because Regieleki Erie spam is really tough to deal with for Lost Box. But Lost Box is going to see a little bit more play, in my opinion. There are some faults, though. Lost Box does have a shaky matchup into the Ancient decks. I think that its Chien-Pao matchup, unless you're going to pop off turn 2, most of the time Chien-Pao should beat you. If Chien-Pao can set up, you probably lose to Chien-Pao. If Chien-Pao doesn't set up and you can cripple them with Sableye Greninja turn 2, the matchup becomes a little bit better. That's another matchup that's a little shaky, though, for Lost Box. But Lost Box seems okay. It also has a decent Zard matchup. Now, again, the Regieleki Zard matchup is a little bit tougher because of Erie, and the Erie spam is annoying. The Hero's Cape, Mist Energy build of Zard's also kind of tough to beat because Mist Energy blocks Roaring Moon, which is like this deck's main way of taking out Charizard. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little bit more Lost Box this weekend. It's another deck that you might have not respect, but kind of don't be surprised if your opponent flips over a Comfey this weekend a couple times, because it is going to see a little bit more play. Now, the Ancient decks are still popping right now. I think we're still going to see a good amount of Roaring Moon Dunsparce. This deck is, like, fine. I mean, its Zard matchup is, like, okay. It's got a fine Zard matchup. It's not, like, fantastic. It doesn't beat Zard, but it's winnable. Its matchup spread isn't terrible. I think its C-Pow matchup is a little bit worse than Ancient Box because your Dunsparces, your main engine, is very weak to Iron Hands and Greninja, whereas the other Ancient Box deck doesn't fold to that as much. But the deck's fine. It's decent. Still, like, got an okay matchup right now. And I think your Guardy matchup's also decent. That's another thing this deck does have. It has a solid Guardy matchup. And then we have Ancient Box itself. Now, I did play Ancient Box to Orlando Regionals, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was an okay deck. The main issue I have with Ancient Box compared to the Moon Dunsparce deck, Moon Dunsparce has a better Zard matchup than Ancient Box does. Ancient Box's Zard matchup is kind of shaky. It's not terrible. Like, it is beatable. You just have to manage your resources really well. You have to get a little lucky with, like, how quick you pop off. Zard is still a challenging matchup just because Charizard go burn and 330 HP is ridiculous. And if they're playing Eries, sometimes they can get rid of your Super Rods. You can't play the game as easily. But yeah, Ancient Box is still a solid deck right now in our format. It's got a good Chien-Pao matchup. It's got a good Lost Zone matchup. It's got a really good Guardy matchup. Like, the deck has good matchups across the board. It's just that one bad matchup against Charizard is going to hold it back ultimately. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another Ancient Box, like, potentially get into top 8 again. Lugia is also just kind of wavering right now. Lugia doesn't seem like a terrible deck in our format. Its Zard matchup is, I mean, a lot of people will say it's good because you have Lugia VSTAR, which kind of destroys Charizard, or you have Cinccino, which destroys Charizard, but I do think the Zard matchup is actually a lot closer. If you're playing against Heroes Cape Zard, you're probably just taking a nice big fat L. Heroes Cape Zard is, like, almost impossible for this deck to beat. But I do think that Lugia is still fine. Hands is kind of on the down low. Like, the Turbo Hands deck is a little less popular. Lost Zone with Hands and Chien-Pao with Hands are still relevant. Lugia's matchup against any deck with Iron Hands is never fantastic. Lugia's not going to be popular. You might hit one Lugia if you make it to day 2. Maybe out of the 15 rounds, you'll hit 1, maybe 2, but don't be surprised to see Lugia underperform. Maybe get another top 32. Future Hands, it is falling off a little bit, but I don't think that it's, like, terrible. It's still going to see a couple decent placements, a couple top 32s, maybe a top 16 at best, but it's kind of just, like, wavering right now, unless somebody can figure out, like, a broken 60 for it. Don't be surprised if you don't hit any Future Hands. Espathra's on the on the come up right now. There's a lot more Espathra than people are gonna really give it credit for in our format. It did have a decent showing at Sao Paulo, and a couple big players were playing it. Like Vini Fernandez was playing Espathra to Sao Paulo, so there are players who are giving this deck respect and the time of day. Though a lot of people might say it's a meme, it doesn't actually beat Charizard. This deck is like Chien-Pao. It has an okay Zard matchup, better Zard matchup than most decks can have right now. It doesn't beat it, obviously. It can put up a good fight against Charizard. And the deck's actually not terrible into some of the big decks right now in the format, especially something like Ancient Box and Roymuth Dunsparce. This deck can easily eat up, though it does have its shakier matchups. Obviously, you need Bayonet in order to beat Chien-Pao, but then your Lost Zone matchups are a little bit shakier. Then you have the Bayonet and stuff. It's still not great. But Espathra's it's an okay deck. I think it's going to be slightly more popular. I'm not saying it's going to be like top 5 most played deck, but it's going to be a little bit more popular. So don't be surprised if you play against Espathra this weekend. Now we got to talk about the control decks. We'll start off with Snorlax Doll. Snorlax Doll is definitely slipping right now a little bit. It's not terrible, but the Charizard matchup is getting harder, which is not good for this deck. The fact that Charizard has figured out ways to beat Snorlax a little bit easier now does make this deck a lot worse. But Snorlax isn't the worst deck ever. Its matchup into Chien-Pao should be good. That's like a popular deck. But you might struggle in other stuff like Ancient Box. Roymuth Dunsparce isn't fantastic. Your Guardy matchup's probably fine, but could be close too. Your Tina matchup's abysmal. So those are your Lost Box matchups. Those are matchups that are a little bit more trickier. But I do think that Blocklax probably will get into day 2. We're probably going to see 1 in top 32 at most. I just don't think it's going to be as popular. But what will not be as popular as Blocklax is definitely going to be the Pidgeot control deck. It's a bit of a harder deck to play, though I do think Pidgeot control is still very strong. And again, if the right player plays it, there's a good chance this could easily be in like the top 32 at Indianapolis, or even top 16. Heck, even this deck could get into top 8 if the right player plays it and does really good with it. Because Pidgeot control, well, it is extremely difficult to play, and there are a few different alternations of the deck playing this build here with the Noivern Luxray, or playing it with like Wigglytuff and Cloth. You got to pick your poison. Which Pidgeot control deck do you want to pilot in the meta, but Pidgeot control is a very powerful deck when played correctly, and it is very strong in our format, and I think is definitely something to look out for. Like, it is hard to play against, because the problem is nobody's going to respect this deck or tech for it, because there isn't really anything you can do about that. You just have to, if you hit it, you hit it, you just have to hope your deck can beat it. But it's a deck that does bring you through the ringer. Like, it's tough, because when you play against it, you don't know what you're doing or what to do. It can get a little close. Goldengo is a funny meme deck. I want to mention like kind of these more like off-meta decks. There might be a Goldengo or 2 in day 2. Goldengo's like fine right now, though I do think the popularity of Charizard playing Eerie is a little bit too much for this deck to handle. Like, Goldengo's like not terrible, but it's just the presence of Eerie is what really hurts Goldengo. And then, of course, Great Tusk Mill. So I've been saying this deck is not as bad as people give it credit for. I did enjoy the Dunsparce build this deck, which I did a video on the main channel, and I did like it. And I think the Dunsparce build is still solid. Great Tusk isn't a bad deck right now. Obviously, it does have its awkward matchups. Like, I think your matchup against Guardy is not great, because Gardevoir literally can just put a single Gardevoir and play and sweep you. But the deck still has potential to be good in our format. We'll have to see, though. I don't think it can really get any higher than, like, maybe a top 64 at best. It's not, like, a fantastic deck, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 1 or 2 of these in day 2, and there could be 1 in top 64 finally. You never know. It is a deck that could definitely do it. And then next up, we have the Arc Piles that are not Arctina. We got Arc Armor Rouge. You know, it's a cool deck. You know, people are playing it because it's fun to play. It is strong. Its Zard matchup isn't bad. Even though, like, Heroes Cape Zard may be a little bit more challenging to beat, I think Arc Armor Rouge is still a fine deck. I would be a little bit more scared of the amount of Chien-Pao that sees play. That's obviously, like, a bit of a harder matchup for you. but I wouldn't be surprised to see like Arc Armor Rouge have a couple day 2 placements. I mean, we did see one almost get top 16 at EUIC, so maybe a top 16 is on the horizon for this deck. I don't know if it gets any better or worse, though, heading into Indy, but you'll have to see. And then Arc Goodra. I wanted to highlight this. Of course, Israel Sosa did get day 2 of this deck. It is a bit more of a niche Arc deck, but it is an Arc deck that I think does have some merit. Goodra's not a bad card. The deck does play like the double Eerie, the TM Devo Hero's Cape. Like, you have a lot of like defensive plays with this deck, which I do like. A more defensive deck right now could be pretty good, as we're seeing even Charizard start to play a little bit more defensive now. But I don't know. Good to see another Argu in day 2. I'd like to see somebody pick up this deck and try it again. Now I want to talk about some other Lost Zone decks. So the other Lost Zone deck outside of the Roaring Moon Hoopa deck is the Shaman Groudon build that Hunter Butler played. I am a big fan of this deck right now. I've been playing it quite a bit in the meta. It's my favorite deck to play. I already did a video on this deck too on the main channel if you want to go watch that, but I do really like the Groudon Shaman deck quite a bit here. I think it's very strong. I do think it has a good Zard matchup because you can go Spit into Raikou, into Shaman or Mew, because I do play a Mew in my build, but I do like this deck a lot. My main issue, of course, with the Lost Zone decks is just Eerie is a problem. I think your Zard matchup is good if they're not playing Eerie. If they're playing Eerie, then it gets a little bit closer because they can remove a lot of your Mirage Gates. You have to be very careful with how you play that matchup. Especially going in blind, you don't know if they have Eerie or not. That can definitely be a little bit of a challenge for this deck to overcome. But I want to see this deck do well again. I'm a big fan of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a couple of these in day 2. And then we got Sablezard. There's a few ways to play it. The big one that I saw do the best at Orlando was like this Roaring Moon build. But there are a few ways to play Sablezard I've seen. There's also the Iron Hand Mew Sablezard deck. That could also pop up. But yeah, Sablezard does seem to be in an okay spot. It's not a bad deck. I think it is slightly weaker than normal Lost Box. And again, now that Eerie's getting more popular now, it's a little bit worse for this deck. Because this deck, I mean, unless you're playing the Moon or some kind of grass Pokemon, it doesn't really have a good way to answer Charizard. Even if you're playing Mew and Iron Hands, you're still not dealing with the Charizard itself, which is kind of the issue. But Sablezard, you know, it's a deck people are playing. A couple in day 2 wouldn't be surprising to see. I don't know if it'll get higher than a top 64. Dialga, another deck that a lot of people really want to be good right now. It did have an okay placement at Orlando Regionals, and I think that it is a deck that definitely can do well in the tournament. It just needs to pop off, and that's kind of the problem with this deck. It's more of a pop-off deck. You have to draw well, you got to run hot in order for this deck to succeed, but it's not terrible at what it does. Somebody's going to have a hot run, probably get a top 64 with Dialga VSTAR. I want to mention Miraidon real quick. Another deck that I've been seeing in a couple conversations and get a couple of day 2s in a couple of the recent tournaments. Miraidon definitely, it's not great. Zard matchup is abysmal. Or it's not great per se. It's not abysmal. It's just not a great matchup. But, you know, wouldn't be surprised to see a couple Miraidon day 2. I wanted to quickly highlight Miraidon real quick. And then, of course, we have Meowscarada. Another meme deck I wanted to highlight here. Meowscarada somehow has gotten 2 day 2s in a row now at, Perth and Sao Paulo? Yo, can the streak keep up at Indianapolis? I don't think Meowscarada is, like, a fantastic deck. Like, its matchup spread doesn't even seem great, in all honesty. Like, outside of maybe having, like, a somewhat decent Charizard matchup. But even then, Charizard can still be tough. But I would love to see Meowscarada in day 2 again. Yo, let's get that 3 regional streak up. Someone's got to do it. Just please. Someone's got to get another day 2 with Meowscarada. Keep up the streak. And then finally, I wanted to highlight Raging Bolt, another deck that does seem like it does have the cusp of being a decent deck. We just have to see it do well. There were a couple of Raging Bolts in day 2 at Orlando. One of them was a Lost Zone version, but the more like turbo build with the Sandy Shocks, even the Palkia build could be okay right now too. But yeah, I want to see Raging Bolt have some more success. Just another deck I wanted to quickly mention here. I want to see some more Raging Bolt do well in the format. But there you go. Those are my Indianapolis Regionals predictions. Again, Charizard is still the BDIF right now. There's no really debating that. It is the best deck in the format. There are 3 ways to play it. Now, if you're playing against Charizard, in my opinion, assume they're playing the Tord Liam build, but you need to be prepared for the other versions like the Regieleki and the Hero's Cape versions. Even like Hero's Cape Regielecki's seen a bit of play. It's not just Regieleki Prime Catcher. Even like Regieleki Hero's Cape is seen play. So you have to be very mindful of the different builds of Charizard going around right now. Keep it in mind, and yeah, if you're going to this tournament, you gotta beat Charizard. And the deck that I think is gonna win the tournament, if I had to predict, is most likely gonna be Charizard, man. It is the best deck in the format. But don't be surprised to see a little bit more Chien-Pao. Like, Chien-Pao's gonna be popular. I think you're gonna see a little bit more Gardevoir than normal, too. This is another deck I think you need to have on your radar this weekend is Gardevoir. I think a lot more players are gonna bring it. Lost Box might see a bit of an uptick in play, too, due to its recent placement at Sao Paulo. It's just another deck people are comfortable with playing, and even in this new format, Lost Box can still do some crazy things. You just got to be a little mindful of Eerie. If you're somebody who's playing a Lost Zone deck this weekend, be careful about Eerie. Don't just blindly ooga booga build your hand up against Zard, and then you just get Eeried, and then you're going to lose the game because of it. You have to be very careful when playing a Lost Box this weekend, because one loss in a set loses you a game if you go to game 3 to time. Like, you know what I mean? So you have to be very careful when playing Lost Box this weekend. It's definitely a deck that, if I were to play this weekend, I would be a little bit cautious of how I approach a Zard matchup, because if they have Eerie, you lose a game, and then it's like you might tie or you might lose the set if you go to time. It's very tough. But yeah, definitely keep your eye out on stuff like Gardevoir, Chien-Pao, and Lost Zone this weekend. Ancient's still going to be popular too. It's not really a deck that's going up and down right now, just kind of staying stagnant. So don't be surprised if you see a little bit of Ancient action this weekend. But yeah, definitely be prepared for the big Charizard Regional Championships. I mean, Indianapolis Regional Championships. So hope you all enjoyed the video here on the second channel. If you did, leave a like and all that good stuff. Let me know if you're going to be at Indianapolis this weekend. Like I said, hope to meet some of y'all there. And yeah, I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.